The ancient oak doors of Kensington Palace stood silent in the early morning hours, their polished brass handles gleaming under the soft light of crystal chandeliers. Captain William Harrison had been serving as head of the Royal Protection Unit for nearly 15 years, and in all that time he had never heard such a piercing cry of alarm from within the royal quarters. It was a Tuesday morning in late autumn when the incident occurred. The palace grounds were covered in a thin layer of morning dew, and the security team was conducting their regular patrol rotations. Captain Harrison was reviewing the daily briefing reports in the security office when the sound that would change everything echoed through the marble corridors. Prince George, who had recently turned 11, was known throughout the palace staff as a curious and intelligent young man. Unlike many children his age, he possessed an unusual fascination with history, particularly the ancient artifacts and documents housed within the palace's extensive private collections. His tutors often remarked on his exceptional ability to absorb complex historical information and his genuine enthusiasm for learning about his family's heritage. On this particular morning, Prince George had requested permission to spend time in his grandfather's private study, a room that housed some of the most precious historical documents in the royal collection. The study, located in the east wing of the palace, was a magnificent room, lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound volumes, ancient maps, and carefully preserved manuscripts dating back centuries. The young prince had been granted access to the study as part of his advanced history lessons. His tutor, Professor Margaret Thornfield, had been working with him on a special project about the royal family's role during significant historical periods. The study contained original documents, letters, and artifacts that were not available to the general public, making it an invaluable resource for his education. As Prince George entered the study that morning, he was immediately drawn to a particular section of the room where several antique display cases housed what appeared to be medieval manuscripts. The morning sunlight streaming through the tall windows cast interesting shadows across the ancient parchments, making the faded ink seem to dance on the yellowed pages. The study itself was a testament to centuries of royal history. Every surface seemed to hold some treasure from the past. Ornate globes sat alongside ancient astronomical instruments, while portraits of long-deceased monarchs gazed down from gilded frames. The air carried the distinctive scent of old leather and aged paper, creating an atmosphere that seemed to transport visitors back through time. Prince George approached one of the display cases with particular interest. Inside, he could see what appeared to be a collection of documents bound in dark leather, their edges worn smooth by countless years. The case was secured with an old-fashioned lock, but the young prince noticed that it appeared to be slightly ajar, as if someone had recently accessed its contents but failed to properly secure it afterward. His curiosity piqued. Prince George carefully opened the display case. The hinges creaked softly as he lifted the glass lid, revealing the musty scent of centuries-old parchment. The documents inside were clearly very old, with text written in what appeared to be Latin and Old English. The handwriting was elaborate and formal, suggesting these were official documents of some importance. As he carefully lifted the first document from its resting place, Prince George noticed something unusual about the parchment beneath it. Unlike the other aged documents, this one appeared to be in remarkably good condition, almost as if it had been placed there much more recently than the others. The paper was a different color, and the ink appeared fresher, though the writing style attempted to mimic the ancient scripts surrounding it. Intrigued by this anomaly, Prince George began to examine the document more closely. As he read the opening lines, his expression slowly changed from curiosity to confusion, and then to something approaching alarm. The document appeared to be some kind of official declaration, but its contents were unlike anything he had encountered in his historical studies. The document seemed to detail what appeared to be a secret agreement or treaty, but the parties involved and the terms described were completely unfamiliar to him. Moreover, certain phrases and references in the text seemed to relate to contemporary political situations rather than historical events. This contradiction between the document's apparent age and its modern content began to trouble the young prince. As Prince George continued reading, his concern grew deeper. The document contained names and references that he recognized from current news reports and political discussions he had overheard among the palace staff. This seemed impossible given the document's placement among clearly ancient historical artifacts. Either this was some kind of elaborate historical coincidence, or something was seriously amiss. The young prince's hands began to tremble slightly as he absorbed more of the document's contents. The implications of what he was reading, if true, would have significant consequences for people he knew personally. The document appeared to detail arrangements and agreements that, if authentic, would represent a serious breach of protocol and possibly even legal obligations. Unable to fully comprehend the magnitude of what he had discovered, but instinctively understanding that it was of great importance, Prince George felt a growing sense of urgency. His royal education had taught him to recognize when situations required immediate adult intervention, and every instinct told him that this was one of those moments. The weight of his discovery began to settle on his young shoulders. Despite his advanced education and maturity, Prince George was still a child, and the responsibility of what he had found felt overwhelming. The document in his hands seemed to pulse with significance, and he realized that he was holding something that could potentially impact many lives. Looking around the study, Prince George suddenly felt very alone and very young. The portraits of his ancestors seemed to watch him with grave expressions, as if they too understood the gravity of his discovery. The morning sunlight that had seemed so pleasant when he entered now cast ominous shadows across the room, and the familiar space began to feel strange and threatening. It was at this moment, overwhelmed by the implications of his discovery and uncertain of what course of action to take, that Prince George made the decision that would bring the palace security rushing to his aid. Taking a deep breath and gathering all his courage, he called out in a voice that carried both authority and alarm, summoning help from those trained to protect and serve the royal family. Captain Harrison's training kicked in immediately upon hearing Prince George's alarmed cry. Years of experience in royal protection had taught him to distinguish between different types of calls for help, and something in the young prince's voice suggested genuine distress rather than a simple request for assistance. Without hesitation, he activated the emergency communication protocol and dispatched the nearest security personnel to the East Wing study. Sergeant Patricia Coleman was the first to respond, having been stationed just 2 corridors away from the study during her regular patrol. A former military police officer with 12 years of service in the Royal Protection Unit, Sergeant Coleman was known for her quick thinking and calm demeanor in crisis situations. She moved swiftly through the palace corridors, her soft-soled shoes making minimal noise on the marble floors as she approached the study. As Sergeant Coleman reached the study door, she could hear Prince George's voice from within, though his words were not entirely clear through the heavy oak barrier. Following established protocol, she knocked firmly but respectfully on the door before announcing her presence. The response from within was immediate. Prince George called for her to enter, and she could detect a note of relief in his young voice. Upon entering the study, Sergeant Coleman immediately assessed the situation with the trained eye of a security professional. Prince George stood near an open display case, holding what appeared to be an old document. His posture and expression suggested he was genuinely troubled by something, but there were no obvious signs of physical danger or distress. The room itself appeared undisturbed, with no indication of any security breach or unauthorized presence. Prince George looked up at Sergeant Coleman with a mixture of relief and continued concern. Despite his young age, his royal training had taught him to communicate effectively with security personnel, and he quickly began to explain the situation. He described how he had discovered the display case slightly open and had found the mysterious document among the historical artifacts. As Prince George handed the document to Sergeant Coleman, she could see that his hands were still trembling slightly. The young prince explained that while he couldn't fully understand all the implications of what he had read, he was certain that the document contained information that seemed inappropriate and possibly dangerous. His instincts told him that adult intervention was necessary, even though he couldn't articulate exactly why. Sergeant Coleman took the document and began to scan its contents, her expression growing increasingly serious as she read. Her military background had given her experience with various types of official documents, and she quickly recognized that what she was holding was indeed unusual and potentially significant. The combination of apparent historical presentation with contemporary content raised immediate red flags in her security-trained mind. While Sergeant Coleman examined the document, Captain Harrison arrived at the study with 2 additional security personnel. The captain's presence brought an additional level of authority to the situation, and Prince George visibly relaxed knowing that senior personnel were now involved. Captain Harrison's calm and professional demeanor helped to ease the young prince's anxiety, while ensuring that proper security protocols were followed. Captain Harrison listened carefully as Sergeant Coleman briefed him on the situation and showed him the suspicious document. His years of experience in royal protection had exposed him to various types of security threats, including attempts to plant false information or compromising materials within the royal residences. The discovery of an anomalous document in a secured area immediately triggered his security concerns. After reviewing the document himself, Captain Harrison made the decision to secure the study as a potential crime scene while conducting a more thorough investigation. This decision was made not only to protect any potential evidence, but also to ensure Prince George's safety and to maintain the security of the royal residence. The study was carefully sealed, and additional security personnel were called in to conduct a comprehensive sweep of the area. Prince George was gently but firmly escorted to a secure location where he could be debriefed about his discovery while remaining safe from any potential threats. Despite his youth, the prince understood the seriousness of the situation and cooperated fully with the security team's requests. His royal training had prepared him for unusual circumstances, and he handled the situation with remarkable maturity and composure. The security team began a systematic examination of the study, looking for any signs of unauthorized entry or tampering with the historical collections. Every surface was checked for fingerprints, and security cameras were reviewed to determine if anyone had accessed the room inappropriately. The investigation revealed that the study had been accessed the previous evening by someone with legitimate credentials, but the timing and circumstances raised questions that required further investigation. Meanwhile, Captain Harrison contacted his superiors to report the incident and request additional resources for the investigation. The discovery of potentially compromising materials within a secure royal residence was treated as a serious security breach, regardless of whether the document proved to be authentic or merely a sophisticated fake. The protection of the royal family required that all such incidents be thoroughly investigated. As the investigation expanded, it became clear that the document's contents warranted examination by experts beyond the security team. Arrangements were made to have the document analyzed by specialists in historical documents, handwriting analysis, and security intelligence. The goal was to determine not only whether the document was authentic, but also how it had come to be placed among the historical artifacts in the royal study. The palace staff members who had access to the study were interviewed to determine if anyone had noticed anything unusual in recent days. The maintenance crew, cleaning staff, and other personnel who regularly worked in the area were questioned about any suspicious activities or unfamiliar individuals who might have been in the vicinity of the study. During this process, it became apparent that the security breach, if indeed that was what had occurred, was likely an inside job. The level of access required to place the document in the specific location where Prince George found it suggested someone with detailed knowledge of the palace layout and security procedures. This realization heightened the security team's concerns and expanded the scope of their investigation. As the afternoon progressed, the investigation team made several important discoveries. The document appeared to have been created using modern paper and ink, despite attempts to artificially age it to match the surrounding historical artifacts. Additionally, the content of the document referenced recent political events and individuals in a way that suggested it had been created within the past few months rather than being a genuine historical artifact. The implications of these findings were significant. If someone had deliberately planted a fake historical document in the royal study, their motivations could range from a simple prank to a more serious attempt at fraud or political manipulation. The security team realized they were dealing with a sophisticated operation that required careful investigation to uncover the truth. Prince George, meanwhile, remained in protective custody while the investigation continued. Despite the stress of the situation, he maintained his composure and continued to provide helpful information to the security team. His quick thinking in recognizing that something was amiss had potentially prevented a more serious security incident from developing further. The forensic analysis of the mysterious document revealed details that transformed the investigation from a simple security incident into something far more complex and concerning. Dr. Corsa Creddick. Elizabeth Morrison, a leading expert in document authentication and historical manuscript analysis, was called in to examine the suspicious parchment that Prince George had discovered. Her initial findings confirmed the security team's suspicions that they were dealing with a sophisticated deception. Dr. Morrison's laboratory analysis revealed that while the document had been created to appear centuries old, it was actually produced using modern materials and techniques. The paper, though artificially aged through chemical treatment, contained fibers and binding agents that had only been developed in recent decades. The ink, similarly, had been formulated to mimic ancient iron gall ink but contained synthetic compounds that would have been impossible to create using historical methods. More intriguingly, the document's content proved to be a clever mixture of genuine historical information and completely fabricated material. The forger had clearly done extensive research into royal archives and historical protocols, incorporating authentic details and language patterns to make the forgery more convincing. However, embedded within this historical framework were references to contemporary political figures and situations that created the alarming anachronisms Prince George had noticed. As the investigation progressed, Captain Harrison's team began to uncover a more disturbing picture. Security camera footage revealed that the document had been placed in the study during a carefully planned operation that took advantage of a brief gap in surveillance coverage. The perpetrator had displayed detailed knowledge of palace security procedures, suggesting either inside involvement or extensive prior surveillance of the royal residence. The investigation team discovered that the security breach had occurred during a shift change, when the normal camera monitoring protocols had been temporarily disrupted due to a scheduled system maintenance. This timing was too convenient to be coincidental, indicating that whoever was responsible had intimate knowledge of the palace's security operations and had planned their actions accordingly. Detective Inspector Sarah Walsh from the Metropolitan Police's Special Branch was brought in to lead the criminal investigation aspects of the case. Her experience with security threats against high-profile targets brought a new perspective to the investigation, and she immediately recognized patterns that suggested this was part of a larger, more sophisticated operation than initially suspected. Inspector Walsh's investigation revealed that similar incidents had been reported at other government and institutional locations across London over the past several months. In each case, forged documents containing misleading or potentially damaging information had been planted in secure locations where they would likely be discovered by authorized personnel. The pattern suggested a coordinated campaign designed to spread disinformation or create confusion within important institutions. The discovery of this broader pattern raised serious questions about the motivations behind the operation. Was this an attempt at political manipulation, corporate espionage, or something else entirely? The sophisticated nature of the forgeries and the detailed planning required to plant them suggested that significant resources and expertise were being employed by whoever was responsible. Meanwhile, Prince George continued to assist with the investigation, providing detailed accounts of his discovery and helping the team understand exactly how he had come to find the document. His clear recollection of events and his ability to articulate what had seemed wrong about the document proved invaluable to the investigators. Despite his young age, his contributions were treated with the same seriousness as those of adult witnesses. The young prince's involvement in the case also led to enhanced security measures being implemented throughout the palace. Additional surveillance equipment was installed, access protocols were reviewed and strengthened, and all staff members underwent renewed security screening. The incident had highlighted vulnerabilities in the palace's security system that required immediate attention to prevent future breaches. As the investigation expanded, it became clear that the operation had been planned months in advance. Financial records revealed unusual patterns of activity that suggested the involvement of a well-funded organization with sophisticated capabilities. Bank transfers, equipment purchases, and travel patterns all pointed to a level of organization and resources that went far beyond what a simple prankster or individual troublemaker could muster. The investigation team also discovered that the forger had attempted to access historical archives at several major institutions, apparently gathering authentic material to use as templates for their fake documents. Library records, museum visitor logs, and academic database access records all showed patterns of activity that correlated with the timeline of the document creation. This research phase had clearly been extensive and professional. Dr. Morrison's continued analysis revealed additional layers of sophistication in the forgery. The document had been created using multiple different techniques to simulate various stages of aging and wear. Different sections showed evidence of different artificial aging processes, suggesting that the forger had invested considerable time and effort in making the document appear authentic under various types of examination. The security implications of the breach continued to expand as the investigation revealed additional vulnerabilities. It became apparent that the perpetrator had conducted extensive surveillance of palace operations, possibly over a period of several months. This raised concerns not only about the current incident, but also about what other information might have been gathered during this surveillance period. The investigation team began working with intelligence services to determine if the operation was connected to foreign interference or domestic extremist groups. The level of sophistication and the apparent political motivations behind the document's content suggested that national security implications might be involved. This expanded the investigation to include counterintelligence specialists and international security experts. As evidence accumulated, a picture began to emerge of a highly organized operation with multiple participants and significant financial backing. The complexity of the scheme suggested that several individuals with different areas of expertise had collaborated to create and plant the forged document. This included specialists in historical research, document forgery, security systems, and operational planning. The investigation also revealed that the operation had not been entirely successful from the perpetrator's perspective. The document had been designed to be discovered by palace staff during routine maintenance, rather than by Prince George during his studies. The young prince's unexpected discovery had disrupted the timeline and potentially prevented the document from being found in the context that would have made it more credible and damaging. Prince George's quick thinking and immediate reporting of the suspicious document had likely prevented a more serious security incident. If the document had been discovered by different personnel under different circumstances, it might have been accepted as authentic and caused significant diplomatic or political complications. The investigation team recognized that the young prince's actions had been crucial in exposing the deception before it could cause harm. As the third phase of the investigation concluded, the team had identified several promising leads and had begun to develop a comprehensive understanding of the operation's scope and objectives. However, the identity of the perpetrators and their ultimate goals remained elusive, setting the stage for the final phase of the investigation and the dramatic revelations that would follow. The breakthrough in the investigation came from an unexpected source. While reviewing security footage from surrounding areas, Detective Inspector Walsh's team noticed a pattern of unusual activity at a printing shop located several miles from the palace. The shop, which specialized in historical reproductions and document restoration, had been visited by the same individual multiple times over the course of several weeks leading up to the incident. Mr. James Hartford, the owner of the printing shop, initially claimed no knowledge of any suspicious activities when questioned by investigators. However, when presented with security camera footage showing his interactions with the mysterious customer, his story began to change. Hartford eventually admitted that he had been approached by someone claiming to be a legitimate historical researcher who needed assistance creating replica documents for an academic exhibition. The customer had paid Hartford substantial sums of money to create what were presented as harmless reproductions of historical documents. Hartford insisted that he had believed the work was legitimate and had no knowledge that the documents would be used for fraudulent purposes. However, his cooperation with the investigation proved crucial in identifying the individual who had commissioned the forgeries. The security footage from Hartford's shop provided the clearest images yet of the suspect, leading to a breakthrough identification through facial recognition technology. The individual was identified as Dr. Marcus Pemberton, a former academic with a background in medieval history who had been dismissed from his university position several years earlier following accusations of research misconduct and falsification of historical evidence. Dr. Pemberton's background revealed a pattern of controversial behavior and questionable academic practices that had ultimately led to his professional downfall. His dismissal from the university had been acrimonious, involving accusations that he had fabricated evidence to support his theories about royal history. The incident at the palace appeared to be an extension of his previous attempts to manipulate historical evidence for personal gain. When investigators attempted to locate Dr. Pemberton at his known addresses, they discovered that he had apparently anticipated their investigation and had already fled the country. However, his hasty departure had left behind crucial evidence in his apartment, including materials used to create the forged document and detailed plans for placing it within the palace study. The evidence found in Pemberton's apartment revealed the full scope of his operation. Computer files showed that he had spent months researching palace security procedures, staff schedules, and maintenance routines. He had also created detailed floor plans of the royal residence, and had identified multiple potential locations for placing forged documents where they would likely be discovered by palace personnel. Most disturbing was the discovery of Pemberton's ultimate objective. His notes revealed that the document discovered by Prince George was merely the first phase of a larger operation designed to plant multiple forged historical documents throughout various royal and government buildings. His goal appeared to be to create a series of fake historical evidence that would support revisionist theories about royal history and potentially cause political embarrassment. The investigation revealed that Pemberton had not been working alone. Financial records showed that he had received significant funding from an organization that promoted anti-monarchist sentiment and conspiracy theories about royal history. This organization had provided him with the resources necessary to conduct his sophisticated operation, including funding for materials, equipment, and the bribes necessary to gain temporary access to secure facilities. Captain Harrison's security review identified the specific vulnerabilities that had allowed Pemberton to breach palace security. A temporary maintenance worker, who had been hired through a subcontractor, had been bribed to provide information about security procedures and to create the brief window of opportunity that Pemberton had used to plant the document. This individual was subsequently arrested and charged with conspiracy and breach of security. The investigation also revealed that Pemberton had attempted to place similar forged documents in other significant historical locations, including the British Museum and the National Archives. However, in these cases, the security measures had been more effective and his attempts had been detected and prevented. The palace incident represented his only successful breach of security. Prince George's role in exposing the deception was formally recognized by the security services. His quick thinking, attention to detail, and immediate reporting of the suspicious document had prevented what could have become a significant security and political incident. The young prince's actions demonstrated remarkable maturity and presence of mind for someone his age. The investigation's conclusion led to significant improvements in palace security procedures. New protocols were implemented for screening temporary workers, additional surveillance equipment was installed in sensitive areas, and regular security audits were scheduled to identify and address potential vulnerabilities. The incident had provided valuable lessons about the evolving nature of security threats facing royal residences. Dr. Pemberton was eventually located by international law enforcement authorities and extradited back to the United Kingdom to face charges. The evidence gathered during the investigation led to his conviction on multiple charges, including fraud, breach of security, and conspiracy. His conviction also led to the dismantling of the organization that had funded his operation. The case became a significant precedent for security services dealing with sophisticated disinformation campaigns targeting historical institutions. The methods used by Pemberton and his associates were analyzed and shared with security professionals at museums, archives, and government buildings to help prevent similar incidents in the future. Prince George returned to his studies with enhanced appreciation for the importance of security procedures and the value of critical thinking when examining historical documents. The incident became an important learning experience for him, demonstrating how his education and training had prepared him to recognize when something was amiss and to take appropriate action. The royal study was thoroughly examined and secured, with all historical documents being re-authenticated to ensure that no other forgeries had been planted. Dr. Morrison's team conducted a comprehensive review of the collection, confirming that the document discovered by Prince George had been the only fraudulent item among the genuine historical artifacts. Captain Harrison used the incident as a case study for training other royal protection personnel, emphasizing the importance of thorough investigation of any suspicious discoveries and the value of taking seriously reports from all members of the royal family, regardless of their age. The case demonstrated that security threats could come from unexpected directions and could involve sophisticated deception techniques. The resolution of the case brought relief to all involved, but it also served as a reminder of the constant vigilance required to protect both the royal family and the historical treasures in their care. The incident highlighted the importance of maintaining robust security measures while still allowing legitimate access to historical collections for educational and research purposes. In the end, what had begun as a routine morning in the royal study had evolved into a significant security investigation that exposed a sophisticated disinformation campaign and led to important improvements in protection procedures. Prince George's alarmed cry for help had set in motion a chain of events that ultimately enhanced the security of royal residences and prevented potentially serious political complications. The incident stood as a testament to the importance of remaining alert to unusual circumstances and trusting one's instincts when something seems wrong, regardless of one's age or position.